Right, guys. Hope you are all well. For many, many, many months, people have been wondering who is Nick Williams. Right? You've all seen him. You've seen him in the comment section. He writes books. Um, he's recently came on the YouTube. He started a channel. But what's intrigued me about Nick is actually his life, not any of his theories on other podcasters. I want to know about Nick, where he grew up, how he made his money, his education, why he's living in Spain, why he's able to travel around the world. I want to know these things and have it on my channel. So you guys can find out. And tonight we will find out. So tonight we will be jumping over to his after mine, and I'll be doing an hour on Nick's channel. The link for Nick's YouTube is in the comment section and description of this video, this live video. So go over, subscribe to Nick's channel, ring the bell, and tune in an hour's time for our live where Nick will be talking about his theories on other podcasters and other people around the world. And but on my channel, it's just about him, and I want to know about him. So Angela, Malter Whitty, Kelsey, Angela, Richard, Pandico. I think that's how you spell it, Pandico. Let's see. And the comments will be switched off on Nick's side, so there'll be no distractions. No distractions. Paul Maximus, how you doing, sir? Chop crime. Trop crime. Next, Garth, Chris. Excellent people. Right. So we're ready to go, ready to bring Nick in right now. The comments will be switched off, and we will be taking questions at the end for 5 minutes. But let's see who Nick Williams actually is.
Hey, look. That's
Nick.
me. That's who I am. Hi, Ronan.
That's who you are. Just give you a wee introduction. I'm going to turn off the comments now, guys. So listen, anybody that stays in here, could you please tell anybody that comes in that I'm not watching the comments? So the comments are turned off on my side too. Do you want to turn off the comments so we can just get to the juicy stuff?
Good stuff. You go for it. I just wanted to say that thank you for having me back on after Thursday, especially in that strange storm
No,
phenomena.
listen, let's clear that up. Nick was supposed to come on last Thursday. He couldn't come on because there was a massive storm. It was a sandstorm, I believe. Yes,
It's called Kalima.
Yeah, and you sent me
It's an
pictures.
orange Sahara Desert sandstorm. It was incredible.
You sent me pictures of your house, and your house was just mangled with sand. It was like,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I
It's
do
a
believe
construction site.
I do believe things happen for a reason. And you know what we're going to do? We're going to get straight into it because we're going to be jumping over to the next channel in an hour. So the next channel is in the description and comment section of this video. So what you can do is go over and subscribe the next channel, and I will be on next channel in 1 hour, and he's going to be talking about his theories and facts about other podcasters and other people in the world. And don't miss that, guys, because that one's it's going to be a good one. But tonight it's about Nick and Nick only. So Nick, right, first off, there's a question I want to know, right? Where did you grow up, Nick?
Do I have to be very specific, or can I be general? In the south of England.
So you grew up in the south of England.
I'll tell you what, I'll go as far as saying Hampshire.
Hampshire, okay. And what was your early life like as, say, your first memory from 4 and then onwards? How did you grow up?
I had a nanny. My mum was busy working. My dad was busy working as well. I had a wonderful nanny from a seriously working class place not far away from where I come from. And we lived in the family house. She looked after me wonderfully. My grandmother wasn't far away, and she was another great influence in my life. And I think the two of them turned me into the kinder side of the person that I like to be now.
Right. So you had a big influence from your grandmother, and you had a nanny. So would it be right in saying you came from a family that had a little bit of money?
Yes, certainly. We didn't need for anything, but I would like to say also that we weren't showered in lavish anything. We
Yes.
had the basics and had to, I think, earn them. They weren't
Yes.
just sprinkled upon us to see what we'd do with them. I think we had to develop interests and therefore be supported when we were young doing that, like building canoes or a chemistry lab or a color photo lab 50 years ago was a bit kind of like new. And I didn't do that. My older brother did. I have
Yes.
an older brother. He's 18
Yes.
months older.
And what did your mother and father do for a living?
My father's always been a politician. Sorry, he's always been a lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
My mother a politician, but they're both involved in politics. I say
Mm-hmm.
both. My dad died in June last year, which is interesting to watch that on CCTV camera. My hat's off to all you idiots that made me do that. But at least I didn't have to go. And sorry, what was your question?
Yeah, so your mother was a politician and your father was a solicitor. Now, and a politician, what sense was that? Were they Tory? Were they what were
No,
liberal?
very liberal. Marxist liberal. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. Yeah, they're very. When I was sent, which is very much against the Labour Party principles of private privatization of social public facilities
Mm-hmm.
like schools, the number one thing you don't do is, as a Labour Party supporter, is send your children to a expensive private school,
Mm-hmm.
and that's what they did. But with the concession, I think that things aren't perfect. And whilst they would like, and indeed my father worked in all kinds of areas of various positions, like in charge of Southampton University. He was in charge of David Attenborough on the board that he governed or oversaw,
Mm-hmm.
and they, I think, orchestrated amongst them the educational, how education is going to be disseminated to so many students, who's going to do what to whom, and how much truth is allowed to actually get in there. He's had all sorts of honourable jobs, like he was chairman of Wessex Regional Health Authority, and if it's not in charge of 50,000 students, that's in charge of 5 million English people in the home counties, Wessex.
Mm-hmm.
And so when Margaret Thatcher came to town, she was put into position as Prime Minister. My father went vocally onto local news programs and international, no, national BBC,
Mm-hmm.
to explain the problems about privatizing his National Health Service.
Mm-hmm.
Margaret, he had a disagreement and he left the job shortly afterwards. It was an honorary position, which meant he didn't get paid shit. So I don't think he was troubled. And it must have been a hell of a hassle taking time out of his own companies and doing that. But he did
So
it with the
and
best
so and
intention.
yeah, so he didn't, in your own interpretation, he didn't have to do certain things because he could have lived comfortable without sort of getting his opinions
Oh, it
sort of.
wasn't a money thing.
He went out of his way to sort of try to help certain situations to
I
benefit
believe he
others.
did. I have more recently become concerned that he might have been compromised, and my mother too.
Hmm.
But I would like
In
to
what
think
way?
not.
In
And
what way?
whilst um, you don't normally get into their positions without playing the game.
Hmm.
And I would like to think, as I had done when I was younger, before I became more aware of how things work politically in that kind of level of government and law,
Hmm.
there are often ways that one is expected to support the local or the media, the mainstream line. And I'm not sure, because I went to a school that now, 40 years afterwards, I realize, because they advertise it, that it's a school for sons and daughters of Masons. It's not hidden. And that is a concern to me. But that also because my grandfather was headmaster of the school when my
Hmm.
dad went there during the war.
Hmm.
I can't believe that they're not all part of a club.
Yeah.
And you and I and anyone else can guess what kind of club it may be. I don't know for certain, but all I can say is that our school supported and supports, I believe, still the sons and daughters of Freemasons. And as a student and an ex-pupil, I could recommend you, if you wished, and I'm sure you don't, to for them to look into you and see if they want to induct you. But it's not
Well,
something
let's look.
I'm not
Let's
interested in.
well, look. It's not common knowledge, but it's not a myth either that if you are involved with the Freemasons, you never go hungry, right? Or you're never lost for a job. So if you're involved, if I was a Freemason and I was involved in a prestigious lodge, I would then maybe obtain more guests, higher quality guests, and it's an attractive thing.
Yes,
It's an attractive thing for people to go to because at the end of the day, it's a gentleman's club. You go there and you benefit
help each other out.
from whatever career you decide to do. Your career tends to take off. Not always, not every Freemason's turn out to be a millionaire, but I don't believe that you'll ever find a starving Freemason or a homeless Freemason.
But I
But
think there are different ranks, and if you start off at the bottom, then it's more
mhm,
street level, literally.
yes.
And as you climb the ranks, then you're going to have more opportunities to be encouraged,
Well,
supported.
your family was very well educated. You are very intelligent people. And just going from my own experiences, I know English people I call it the double barrel names like Torrance Spencer. You get Torrance Spencer, and they're lovely people. They're over here, and even though they're very very wealthy people, they have a work ethic like I've never seen. So, for instance, if they need a house built, they are digging the foundations of the house. They would live in a caravan with £1 million in the bank. Money means nothing to them. This person was a commander of a ship. Well, he's dead now in World War II. And this person lived literally in like a hobbit's house with grass growing over the roof, but he was worth millions. So it's an eccentric. Would it be right in saying that maybe you came from a sort of like an eccentric? So would your father been an eccentric type person?
Mm, I don't think as a lawyer you can allow yourself to be unless you live in the US and you're
Mm-hmm.
supporting some rich and famous Hollywood murderer.
Mm-hmm.
No, no, I wouldn't. I think he was uh, lived very much inside himself. He was sent off at the age of 4 years old from Africa, where he was born, to Kingswood, which was moved then to another place. Um, uh, and in that way, I think it kind of helped to dissolve the apron strings, if you like, the connection with the family. And whilst his family didn't abandon him, and his father was indeed the headmaster of the school, I think at the same time he suffered emotionally from that. And that's
Mm-hmm.
how private education is designed. It's
Mm-hmm.
to stop doctors, lawyers, spies, judges from being able to act with their heart. They uh,
Mm-hmm.
head thinking people. So to go back to your question, your friends were eccentric in the practical sense.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe my family have. I don't even think they're eccentric with their political views. I believe that they're insane, but I think that half the world's insane, so they're only just representative of the loud majority of the people.
And did you moving on then? So your childhood was interesting. And would I say did you just travel a lot? How was your childhood growing up from the ages of like 6 to teenage years to like 17? Were you just traveling a lot? Was it promoted for you to do a certain thing in school, that sort of way, or were you sort of you're given a free rein to do as you please?
My thank you. My brother was is very bright and 18
Mm-hmm.
months older than me, which meant that I could do my thing. They had him. There's no being better than him in that realm, the traditional educational role.
Mm-hmm.
And without actually applying myself in a different direction, it was
Mm-hmm.
clear that because of my different skill sets and limitations, especially with memory, it didn't make learning easy. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it was easy for him. He just applied himself, but he could at least retain the information at a level which was practical to succeed like he has.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 6 and 7, I had all the freedom I wanted, as much as I liked. There were very few restrictions on me, but I was quite easygoing in my limited memory.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think that people needed to be worried that I was going to get into trouble or cause trouble. And there was no one around really to cause me trouble. So
Hmm.
I had all the freedom that I wanted. Um, and then as I got older, um, let's have a think. It all went horribly wrong.
Just
I
to
went off.
touch on something there, like, sorry, I don't want to rush into this. Would I be right in saying that maybe you felt like your older brother was sort of put in the pedestal as the golden child?
Oh, he absolutely was, and I was the
Hmm.
sacrificial goat.
So there was a
Bless his heart, but
narcissistic,
that's the way it works.
there was narcissistic tendencies in your house.
Looking back on it, extremely negligent and selfish in personality and time. I didn't
Hmm.
need much time, but the time that I needed, I felt should have been quality time. And with such busy parents, whilst I did have people that really cared for me and gave them all the quality time and more that a
Hmm.
child needs to have empathy,
Hmm.
my parents had the foresight, however, to get those people around me to give me the love that they were absent in it. But don't get me wrong, I have lovely parents. We have grown apart over distance and time and political viewpoints. But
Hmm.
they're very admirable people that I had believed cared enormously about others. Um,
Yeah. Can I ask you a quick? Can I ask you a question? And this
Anything
is
you
a
like, Ronan, it's all.
this is a shock question, but it's a question that I feel like I have to ask some people that maybe came from your background. Do you feel like you're an overachiever or an underachiever,
Both.
both at the same time? How do you explain that?
Well, it depends which perspective you're judging me or viewing me. Climbing Everest, I haven't done, but if you were talking about that kind of achievement, that's my
Hmm.
kind of achievement. Cave
Hmm.
diving, that's what I did.
Oh, so yeah, your life, your travels,
So the achievements,
yeah, yeah. I get what
the
you're saying. You've
achievements. Go on. Sorry.
I get what you're saying. But your wealth is your experiences in life. So in that sense, you've
Yes.
overachieved. Okay, well
I,
that's a good
I had
answer.
a large fortune spent on my formal education, a classical uh, education, private school education. I
Hmm.
used none of it. I got a broken nose for mathematics, and I think I got two other exams, which neither of them were passes. Religious studies and English, I got C's. Everything else was a complete fuck off out of here, do not come back. Um,
Um,
so
yeah.
I was not able to follow my brother or my father or my grandfather, but what I did instead was to, without having any idea that I would, in my early to mid 20s, I went off to Mexico. And that's where life really started for me. In the interim, before I went to Mexico, I got into drugs. So from the age of 17, when I left boarding school, I went to a sixth form college. I had a motorcycle accident and couldn't continue doing that. And after I got better, I went to a crammer college, which meant that I had more or less one-on-one tutorship. I hated it, and I got myself kicked out. And that was the end of education, and that was beginning of real life.
Hmm. And what did you do coming out of school? What jobs did you go into? What type of work did you go into?
From being a labourer on large I'm not sure what the term is, civil projects, um, to picking every kind of fruit you could imagine. I lived in a chestnut forest several hundred meters above my head 37 years ago when we built a little farm up there. And picked a ton of chestnuts and sold them directly to the brazier in Malaga on the street instead of him buying them for twice the price at the co-op. So we all saved or made a bit more money than we would otherwise. Chopping wood. I was a dispatch rider in London when I was 17. I was the worst dispatch rider that you would ever see, except you might
And
not see me because I was going too fast to make up for my
was
horrible
this
navigation.
were these early jobs that that you chose to do?
I was 17 then, and my
Yeah.
dad allowed me to get a motorbike. In fact, he paid for it. It was a CX 500, a plastic maggot. But when you're 17 and you have a chance to get away from home, live with your mates, and work every day on a motorcycle, When you're 17, that sounds great, but when you're 17 and 2 months, it now is a job and enormously tiring. And I was very bad at it. My navigational senses are not as they should be doing my kind of the shit that I've done. Surveying caves, you need to know where you're at. I was
Yeah.
a survey assistant cave diver. I was never lead a dive in my life.
So,
With guys.
sort of going by that, there you would go out, you would see a certain, not a career, but you would see a job, you would dive into the job, learn about the job, do it for a few years, and then move on to another job.
It was never intended to be like that. When I was 12, I got the two library books, softback library books about scuba theory. I loved Jacques Cousteau and made my own wetsuit when I was 12, in the living room with a pot of glue and a roll of neoprene rubber, and tried it out and didn't have enough weight, luckily, to sink because I had no scuba gear, and put it in a cupboard. And the next time I tried it on, I had grown out of it. So I put that on the back burner, knowing that that was glass blowing and metal forgery and Damascus knife steel making.
Hmm.
That was something that I really wanted to do. So from the age of 12, I kind of set my goals on the Yucatan. I had a friend at school whose dad worked in Merida, in Colombia, is that? And don't think it is. And in Merida in the Yucatan. And he brought back little shark's teeth and stuffed caiman's heads and Salem cigarettes, and we thought that was cool. And this set sort of like an idea in my mind that I might like to visit the Yucatan one day. So I did, and I was directed at the particular shop that trained me from open water one to the first professional stage, which is a dive master. And I was lucky enough that there was both a vacancy in the dive master rankings that I could fit into. And because I was trained in their methods and system on their reefs, they could sort of trust that I might be able to do the job with some proficiency. And I think it could be agreed perhaps that I did. And I loved it. It was just
That your
brilliant.
20s? Was that your 20s, early
Yeah,
20s?
I left when I was England. I think when I was about 25, and not very long after that, I was in Aquamal in the Yucatan, running as the chief dive master my own show. Effectively, I was responsible, theoretically not responsible as captain, but um, we don't need to get into that. They were lovely folks. But it was my responsibility to make sure the divers went on the boat underwater, which is not always an inviting and friendly environment. They're
Hmm.
already certified, so they're able theoretically to look after themselves, but in practice, often they have forgotten the skills if ever they were properly taught them. So my job was not as a glorified guide, but an actual
A team leader,
interactive safety diver.
sort of like a team leader, a team leader.
A team leader. But you see, it's very difficult to lead a team when you're in a tourist environment where everyone's for a week or 10 days having fun. My job is to make sure that they enjoy themselves safely and have a nice enough experience that they keep coming back. And everybody
Would I
wins.
be right in saying at that moment in your life that there would have been a lot of booze and a lot of women?
No. You would have been if you wound it back a couple of 3 years, but then absolutely not. I was exceedingly disciplined. My office was at the beach bar from 4:30 until 5:30.
Hmm.
Then I would have a salad and a very fixed diet in the restaurant, which was very cheap, which is how I afforded it or justified doing that.
Hmm.
I would have, I think, two drinks in the happy hour, and that would be it. So, no, I was into smoking weed after I finished work. That put me into a nice headspace after I met my clients and the locals. Um, then we'd talk business, or mostly not. I'd have my evening meal early. I'd go back to my RV camped in the jungle, and I'd prepare my head from the previous day's diving or that day's diving. Uh, and then I'd work out what we were going to do depending on conditions and currents and whatever with the next day's diving, depending obviously on the, ability of the divers and blah, blah. And
Just
that's
on
what
a
I did.
side, just on a side note, Nick, are you very routined in your life? Like you'll wake up
Yeah,
in the morning and you'll have A, B, C, D, E, F,
yeah,
G, and you'll have it
yeah.
in your head, and you will do that
No, I
to
don't have it in my head because it's automatic, and
right.
that's why it's automatic is I don't have to think about it. I can't
So
be thinking
right and
about
saying,
it.
I'm not saying, listen, I'm not, listen, I can't give anybody a diagnosis. I'm not a
Please
doctor,
do.
but would I be right in saying that maybe there could be a little touch of maybe Asperger's or OCD?
I hope so. Oh, absolutely, certainly OCD, and I'd like to think Asperger's slash autism as well. I don't care how I'm branded, um, as long as you're not qualified.
No, I'm not qualified at
Anyone
all.
who wants to classify me psychologically without speaking to me as a professional really should know better. They need to sit me down with them, and if they'd like to come and stay, they're welcome for a cup of tea.
But you
And
do
then
see this, you do see this in a lot of, as I call them, the double barrel families from England.
we don't
You'll
have a
see.
double barrel name,
No, I know you don't, but
but they
you
do.
have came from that type of sort of family, hard work, but still at the same time, you were well off, but they did still promoted hard work. And what
They
you'll find is
did
a lot
have
of
a
the
work ethic. That's true, and
a
I've got that
very,
only
very,
from them.
a very, very strong work ethic. And what you'll find is a lot of these people were on the spectrum. And when their kids grew up, they were on the spectrum too. But
I agree.
in the sense that it was driven, so you knew from A to Z exactly what you just needed to do throughout your whole life. And um, do you think
Regimented.
regimented? Do you think that regimented sort of attitude sort of benefited you throughout your sort of work career and your career throughout your life?
Now you mention it, which is a lovely question. It has to, of course.
Yeah.
You can't be sent off to a school at the age of 7 and have to stay there for 12 whole hours and find your way back in the middle of the night before you do it all over again and again and again. I
Hmm.
made a promise to myself very early on that as soon as I could get out of here, I was off. And that's indeed the will that I set or the way and manifested that with at the age of 17, I went by myself to India, and that's 40 years ago. And even today, I think that that would be slightly unusual. I don't know who's judging, but not many 17-year-olds that I've ever met have done that, and certainly not 40 years ago. And that really opened my eyes, not so much to India,
Actually,
coming back home.
now you mention it, Nick. I just done a recent interview with a guy called Lockie Campbell. It's coming out in the 6th of April, and he done something very similar. He went to India as a young man, and as an older man, his kids one of his kids followed him over, and him and his child tried to smuggle 20 kilos of hash into Japan. And he himself, he's not an eccentric character. He's Glaswegian. He's Scottish, and what you're noticing, they're very sort of good at sort of telling their life story. And you're sort of very similar to that. You know what I mean? You've got very similar, not backgrounds, but completely different backgrounds, but similar path, except you didn't try to smuggle 20 kilos of hash into Japan. You
What is your
wanted to.
friend called?
He's not my friend. Well, he is my, well, not a friend, but I interviewed him, Lockie Campbell. He's got
Lockie.
a documentary, but
I will watch your video when it's out,
it's
and
a
thank you. That sounds
speaking
interesting.
speaking to him and then speaking to you. There's sort of there's similar things that I'm seeing. So where it was a rare thing to go off to India, I don't think you were the only one. I think there was other people saying there's other things in the horizon here, and India seemed like the place years ago where would it be right in saying not that you were a hippie, but you sort of loved that traveler
I
type?
aspired to be a hippie without understanding then what a hippie really was, and
Yes,
my
yes,
age was wrong.
yes.
Yes, I did then aspire to being a hippie. That was as you could describe me in the best possible way, and I would have taken it as a compliment. But
Yeah,
I described myself as a smoker, and I didn't smoke tobacco. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. I think you know what I mean.
yeah. LSD.
Marijuana. I have bought and smoked um, 40 kilos, 30 kilos. It can't be 40, 30 kilos of shit. Yeah, my friend. I mean, that's insane. And look at me.
But you did. This is the thing. You weren't a big drinker of alcohol, so that's
No,
probably
that's
kept
not
you.
true. I was an alcoholic almost all of my life until I 4 years ago, Christmas, I stopped. I think I nearly died in the process, but
Are you serious?
um, well, my blood pressure, I think, dropped so much that I wasn't able to lift myself off the floor, and the sweat that
But you
poured off
did.
the.
But you said to me though, in your twenties, you didn't drink. It was only previous to that you did have a bit of a sort of a party lifestyle. But was there a part in your twenties that you didn't drink and then you went back to alcohol?
I have been able to give up on occasions, and
Hmm.
but alcohol, not marijuana. Marijuana was something that I did before I went and lived in Sweden 20 years ago. So after I worked in Formula One and club motorsport at Silverstone, I went to Scotland and I learnt mountain craft by myself mostly,
Was that your
winter mountain
30s?
survival.
Your 30s?
Um, Late 30s, early 40s, actually, early 40s.
Well, let's move into your
Um,
30s now. What did you do in your 20s was quite interesting, very regimented. But in your 30s, then what was your 30s like?
well, that was mostly in Mexico. I went
Mexico.
first from the US across the US from east to west coast using a thing called a drive away. You present yourself with a license and destination, and you say, "Here's my license. I want to go here. If there are any cars going in that direction that need moving, I will be your driver. All you need to do is to pay the gas, and then you can drive from one coast to the other for free. And then you got this free car for 3 or 4 days to climb the Grand Canyon, which we did on our spare day. And otherwise, we had lovely Route 66 trip across the east to the west coast and end up in California delivering the car to a woman who worked in the Caltech Space Lab, who took us out for a Chinese meal, which was fantastic. And then we went to meet our friends in the Music Institute in Hollywood,
Hmm.
who were studying there. And then we went down to Mexico. I continued on when they went back, and I went to Guatemala, and then
Wow.
came back to Mexico then to become the diver that I needed to be. And then
So you
after
you
that,
you then sort of progressed in your diving career in South America.
yeah, thank you for asking, because this is the most technically advanced and alien and hostile environment that I've ever been relatively safe investigating. So I was the assistant of a guy who I met who was the editor of the National Speleological Society magazine, the cave diving section. And he was doing a solo cave dive, surveying it, laying a line initially into a new cave system is typically what you would be expected to do if you were a proper explorer scientifically. And then you would use that line to take measurements, distances, tangents, and then you would measure the cave. He had been a officially trained surveyor, and his map was beautiful. I met him in Mexico. He liked my style. He wanted to teach me cave diving, and I wanted him to do that too. And so my cave diving training was as an assistant surveyor. Now, working in an overhead environment obviously has its dangers, but working in any environment when you're underwater adds pressure, because if you're not trained to learn what to do and how, you can get overwhelmed and distracted with one thing when you're supposed to be looking after your life providing functions instead,
Hmm.
your gas pressures. So he had confidence in me, and I was very comfortable in water. So we progressed. I went back after that summer when he went back to run his cave diving adventure shop in Alachua County, and I was the manager of his shop. So we went from these cave systems in Mexico, which are now in excess of 500 kilometers of continuous water-filled passageways,
Wow.
highly decorated with stalactites and stalagmites and all kinds of crystals and weird and wonderful stuff that they film beautifully now, but we were messing around with that technology in the old days. And then I went from Florida, where it's wide, bright, low flow, and warm and shallow. So very easy to survey because you don't have all these decompression problems or need to mix gas, especially in those days. And then went to Florida, where the cave systems there, which we lived over and explored also, were much gnarlier, much deeper, much colder, tannin rich. So that stained the limestone walls. Instead of reflecting it in white down in Florida, they would suck up your car lights, as bright as car lights.
Hmm.
Um, and it's really dark and deep, and that puts a whole different element upon cave diving. And I was the assistant cave diver,
Well, I would. Do you know
instructor.
what, Nick? Nick, I would actually love you to come back and do a whole series on cave diving because that is some of the most interesting stuff. And just a quick, I don't want you to go into it too much, right? But on your cave diving sort of adventures, did you notice? It's just a question I've always wanted to ask the cave diver. Did you notice that any signs of life prior to the water being there?
Great question. Oh, there's no doubt about that because during the ice ages, the interglacial ice age,
Hmm.
or the interglacial period, 12,500 years ago was the
Yep.
peak of the last ice age.
That the
There
Younger
have been
Dryas? Younger
16
Dryas?
in the last 300,000 years, and we're coming to the end
Hmm.
of that period. So the cave systems with the melting and the freezing of the ice caps
Hmm.
raise and lower sea levels. So
Yep.
these systems, with the acidic rain that's falling in the jungle, it percolates through the limestone because rivers don't run on the surface on limestone. It's not able to. So it finds a level where the desert, which we've just had an example of the orange desert, very fine clay particulates, when it's mixed with water, it becomes literally like child's clay, and it filters down because it's so tiny, all the particles through the limestone. It actually
Hmm.
forms a bed which is impervious to water and forms the base of the river to run along.
Wow.
And because it's acidic, it etches out the cave systems. And as I say, the one that we lived above has 500 and more kilometers of continual waterfall passageways of water that's often so clear, it's literally like in air. And you saw perhaps the video that I sent to you, some of the conditions that show this environment so splendidly with the professionals that know how to get the best from that environment and to express
Quick
it to.
question. Quick question. Do you believe in Atlantis?
Yes, absolutely. And there's huge amounts of evidence. And I think there's more than one.
Yeah, well, it's not. Listen, when I say Atlantis, people are going to go, "Wow, he thinks he believes in mermaids." No, we're not talking about. We're not talking about that type of Atlantis. We're talking about there was a
Ancient
lot.
civilization.
And there was an ancient civilization, Atlantis, and they do believe, if you listen to Graham Hancock, who I would love to interview, and I'm actually in the works of contacting Graham to get him on. He's a great guy, and his contacts who are sort of working on Atlantis in the most scientific way possible. They know that it existed. It's just the correct location, but I think it's going to come out this year where it
I
is. But
believe, Ron, that there's multiple ones.
yes,
The
land
Rishat
bridges. There was
structure
land
in
bridges.
Africa.
They think that there was land bridges connecting a lot of these sort of places.
And that their culture many tens of thousands of years ago, or certainly many thousands of years ago, moved and traveled and took their technology all around the world.
Yes, yes. It's
And
so
there's a lot of
fascinating.
evidence
Well,
for
what we'll
that.
do is we'll actually if Graham ever comes on, you'll it would be absolutely fascinating to get you onto with your wealth of knowledge.
That would be lovely. Thank you.
That would be fantastic. But
I think
right,
there's
so just to move on because this is about you, and we are jumping over to your channel in 15 minutes, right? So now we're into your 40s, right? So if you mind me asking, Nick, what age are you now?
what do I do now?
No, no, what age? What age are you now?
Oh,
Age.
58, very nearly 58.
You're 58. You don't look 58, Nick. You look, I would say, if you had if you said to me you were 47, I would believe you're 47. It's fantastic.
Thank
You
you.
look fantastic for your age.
Thank you.
But
Thank you. I do
so
not know how.
well, well, maybe listen, maybe there's something to alcohol and weed. And have you just a question, have you ever been married?
No, I haven't.
There is you've just hit the nail on the head. You've never been married, and that's why you look young. That's just it's as simple as that. I don't care what anybody says. Anybody that I speak to that hasn't been married, male, looks really, really young.
That's a
It's
terrible reflection on modern society or
it,
marriage.
I don't listen. I don't care. It's the truth. For some reason, people who don't get married, okay, they mightn't have had the certain marriage experiences going out through their life, but by the time they get to 58, they look 10 to 15 years younger. It's just a known fact. But anyway, we'll get away from that just in case people get mad at me for saying that. But
Are
listen,
you still at young Ronan?
well,
It's only because
listen.
you are.
Well, yeah, I'm 34, but let's move on. Right? So into the 40s now, right? And what was your 40s like? Now you said that what did you do in your 40s after? Did you stop the diving then?
Came back from Mexico after
Yes.
10 years away, and I came back to pop in to the UK. And I happened to choose the very day of the Labour Party election, or the uh, Labour Conservative Party election, whatever the hell you call that, when Tony Blair was elected to the new Labour Party. And that's where my mum came into it. So she was busy doing that whilst I was collected by her new dude. So he came to pick me up, and I stayed, I can't remember, with them for a little while. But I also had a narrowboat. So I was cranking myself single-handedly around the British waterways. I worked on the Leeds and Liverpool Canal in the central Leeds section, in the city part of it. So the river was part of my responsibility. The two locks there to let you into the basin, all the moorings, the public managing them as well. The train station above, there are arches below, and that was part of our section. I think we had an old power station as well, a brewery, back of a university residential area. So it was an exciting, dynamic place to operate. But the head of the British Waterways, at least my boss, um, he and I had an argument. So I was moved out on my boat. I could stay in my boat, but look after a high rise in the rural woods, but in the outskirts of Leeds, with big areas of high rise
Hmm.
apartments with social issues. So a lot of the children that would come down from those estates would end up around the canals, rallying stolen cars, burning them in the jungle, trying to get into fights with me in the middle of the night, and interesting stuff like that. So that was fun. It had its limitations, and I moved on from that. I stayed there for a while on a marina over the winter, and then I can't remember exactly where. We got snowed and iced in, and I thought, well, off I'm going. I went over to the west coast, and then I went down to Milton Keynes, where I set myself up as a photographer, as a
Wow.
motorsport photographer,
Wow.
um, able to go and earn a living every day that the FIA wasn't there and Formula One or an FIA event. I could then rub shoulders with club motorsport drivers. And that's from historic Formula One to Bentley driving to Mini driving and anything else you could possibly imagine in between, including bikes, Superbike Championship, for
Yeah.
example.
Hmm. Well,
So it's very different
that's
environment
an,
going from the jungle of Mexico to
that's
the trackside.
that's something that I'm thinking. So you, how do you jump from that to that though? Is it
I
is it
guess I'm
easy?
I'm extreme, and it's
It,
not.
is it
I'm
easier
naturally
back in the
extreme,
day?
so that's very natural for me.
But I mean,
It,
but I mean, was it easier back in the sort of years ago to sort of jump from one sort of job to the other without having like today you need four A's just to
no,
get
no, no,
just
no.
just
None,
just to
none
be
of
a bin
these,
man. Do you know what I
none
mean?
of these took any. All of these took qualifications, but they're qualifications that you could do out of a traditional school
Yeah.
classroom. So I went and studied enormously how to mix gas, so you don't
Yes.
die doing stupid things on the wrong air mix at great depth.
So if you think,
Um,
Nick, just to let you know, if you think that I'm not listening to you, I am listening to you. I'm posting your channel in the
Thank you. Don't
in
you
the
worry. Nice of you
sorry,
to explain. Thank you.
in the live chat, so then people can jump over in 10 minutes to hear what you have to say, and I will be getting into what we're talking about on your channel in
Lovely.
just a wee minute. So
Thank you.
you
Thank you.
carry on.
Where were we? We were where we were.
So yes, you were up. You were not. You were a photographer. You're now working in motorsports, I think.
I had some fantastic experiences in
Yep.
motorsport. It was
Hmm.
totally overwhelming with my Asperger's, OCD, autism, and various other borderline syndromes. And I was, for a variety of reasons I'd love to talk about, but not here and now,
Hmm.
I gave up on it and I moved to Scotland, and there from Scotland, learning mountain survival and cold or hostile environments again. I took those skills to Sweden and lived outside for my first 6 weeks, which was over the winter up until Christmas, out in the Arctic. So that was my transfer from Scotland to Sweden, was in the winter because it was winter, and that was the reason
And
specifically I
what
went there to
age
just stay for 10 years.
what age were you then?
Think I was 43 or 4,
So 43.
42 even.
So you're young. I was going to say, if you're going to say you were like 49, I'm thinking to myself,
Um,
moving to the Arctic at 49, you would probably feel it in your bones a little bit more as say your early 40s, because I couldn't imagine the coldness of learning like
well, actually, if you've been out in a Scottish mountain in winter and or an Irish mountain in winter
yeah.
for extended periods of time and got uh, appropriately wet and stayed there for a few days, you would then think perhaps that because it's so far south, therefore it's going to be more comfortable. When you get ice cold, there's no water, so you don't have to worry about getting wet. So generally, things aren't stormy, which is why it gets so very cold because it doesn't mix up the air layers. So cold settles at the bottom, and then you live very comfortably in that because you have multiple layers of thermal insulation. If there's no wind, there's no need for a fire. So I lived for most of the 6 weeks without even food cooking equipment. I would go
Wow.
to the supermarket when I needed to and eat the food quickly enough before it froze into frozen tomatoes are a weapon. Peanut butter is useless if it's frozen. I mean, how do you work with that?
No, no, you can't. No, it's
So I
just
wasn't
turns into,
hunting,
yeah,
but
yeah.
I did live for a week off berries, so that was fun. I took some chocolate with me as well, just in case.
So what then? Where does that take you up to then? What's the
Then I
next
was in
stage?
Sweden. Then I went to Berlin. Oh! I
Yeah.
was stalked and hunted by the Swedish authorities, by their secret services, because I uncovered huge car testing corruption where I lived. I was described as a spy that wouldn't go away, would he? And my answer was, no, fuck you, I won't. You're going to pay me for that. They had sent a message that I had sent to the head of security that described me as a spy, and he had returned the message instead of forwarding it internally. So I knew what he was thinking because the silly idiot had said so. I had to only translate it from Sweden to find out the quote that I just quoted to you.
Hmm.
Um, he's a spy who won't go away, will he? Well, I used that opportunity to sue the bastards over 18 very stressful months without help from a motherfucker and win enough money to pay off the mortgage for my 50-acre farm, my 10,000 trees with my farm buildings, and everywhere I looked belonged to me. I'm not a capitalist imperialist, but it was fucking mine. It cost me 7,500 euros.
Everybody's a
Quid.
capitalist. Everybody's a capitalist. Even a socialist and a communist is a capitalist to some
Even
degree.
they're
Trust me on that.
just hypocritical capitalists.
Yeah, they're everybody's a capitalist.
Fuck
They're
all
just
of you.
do you know what I mean? It's crazy. Everybody
I do
tries
my
to
thing.
capitalize in their life, regardless of what political background you come from. So right, so your 50s. Let's get into your 50s now. What's your 50s like?
Stressful as hell, and I need to get out.
Right. So
Um,
there's a lot of stuff in your 50s that happened, that you
yeah, it
sort
was
of,
never intentional.
yeah, yeah. So let's break this down. So like, what took you to Spain? Why are you
I
living in
had been
Spain?
here 37 years ago and loved it.
Right.
And since then, there's been an uninterrupted 37 years of libtarded feminazism.
So
And
you haven't been living there for 37 years.
no, I haven't. No, I've been doing
You
everything
visit
else I've described,
because
and then I came back.
because you have to be
Oh,
so
sorry.
clear
Yeah, yeah,
because
yeah. I've
people,
never had a base other than where I am. Where I am
yes.
is always my base.
So was Spain your base?
6 years ago, I came
6 years
back
ago.
after 37 years, and I had a very happy year coming off drugs. I cycled 1,000 milligrams of methadone in tablet form. It's called Viceptone.
Right.
From Almeria to above me where I am now, up a very steep mountain, probably about 10,000 feet in one day of elevation on a very old mountain bike, dripping with gear. And I ran out of food. I didn't have any food all day. I had a baguette of bread, some pistachios, and an espresso coffee, and 20 mils of methadone. And that
Were you addicted to
propelled me.
methadone or were you addicted to heroin?
Oh, yeah, anyone who takes methadone for more than a while is addicted to it. It's horribly
Were
addictive.
you on methadone because of heroin or was it just
Yeah,
methadone alone?
yeah, yeah.
You
I
took
would buy
heroin?
it from my friends until I got wise, and then I got my own drug advisory counseling and an export license from the Home Office and a re-import license for any
So no,
residue.
just to be clear, were you ever taking heroin?
Oh, yeah, in every way that one would ever guess or never guess, one would take it. Yeah, yeah. I cranked the shit second time I ever did it. It was the best thing, the best feeling and the worst thing I ever did at the same time. The guy who turned me onto it's probably killed 100 people, directly or otherwise.
And where did you get
Um,
on? When was your first heroin hit?
I think I was 17 in a train coming back from London, going to school with the coolest guy I ever knew, who was the devil.
So it's really hard to round this up because you go through periods of your life where you're taking nothing, you're not even drinking alcohol, and you're regimented. But then you're saying to me that you've took heroin when you were 17.
Doesn't mean
But
to say you can't be regimented on methadone, particularly if you have a
mhm.
regular supply, which methadone
So
helps.
without going back through your 20s, then were you taking methadone?
Yeah, yes, just prior to and including going away to Spain, where I am now, 37 years ago. So if I'm 58 nearly, then you can do the mathematics and work out roughly when I was here. So I cycled methadone here with a export license from the Home Office. And that's sort of why I want to invite other people to come and do something similar, because it worked for me and I want to give something back.
So you've been on a heavy opioid since 17 years of age,
No, 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 no. I
up to
dabbled.
7 years
I
ago, up
didn't
to
spend my family fortune on drugs. When I ran out of money, which was quite soon, I reverted to hashish and Valium. I had been prescribed Valium and took those over numerous years when I was younger, and I'm back on them again now, and I have been for over 10 years continually, nearly continually.
and you went clean off opioids when?
Oh, long time ago. Prior to going away to be a scuba diver, so in my mid-20s, I think I never took heroin again, but I did take methadone when I fell back in, when I went back to my hometown.
Mhm.
Then I was snapped up by the old guys who hadn't learnt and didn't want me to move on. I think it was not because they were unkind. I think that they had good intentions, but because their world was heroin and they were literally falling apart at the seams, I think that they just wanted to be nice and friendly and hang out. But that meant becoming a heroin addict, and that was never my thing. I was never
Mhm.
naturally a heroin addict or even indeed an addict. I
Mhm.
have issues in my life which helped, um, and non-issues that are also helped to improve the quality of my life. And if I don't do anything too extremely, I can kind of manage a balance. I'm prescribed
So
20 pills of Valium, but I take 5.
So we're going to jump over the next channel in the next 2 minutes. But the question I want to ask a man that's been through many experiences in his life: why is this man Nick Williams on YouTube with conspiracy theories against certain podcasters and certain people? What drives you? Why do you not just go, "I don't give a fuck. I'm just going to go off diving here and live my life. I actually don't care about these people." Why does it mean to you so much to be the famous Nick Williams in the comment section with the books, as you call them, the books
No, you
of
did.
well, I actually dubbed them the books because they are books. They're books to a certain degree.
The
Paragraphs,
comments. The
long,
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 long, voluminous
long
comments.
comments of sort of
Sorry, everyone.
of certain podcasters that we will be talking about in next channel in 2 minutes. So why are you here at this stage of your life doing this? Why does it matter to you?
I never expected it. I expected to come back to a community that I left that had developed over the last 35 years. It had all fallen apart at the seams, and there was nothing left of it but a couple of spread out individuals who weren't doing well, exclusively. And so, what was your question again, Ron? Sorry.
So why does it matter to you what
Ah,
any other podcaster does?
I got kicked off a website called Orgiva Massive. That's the name of the town where I live, which is ORGIVA, Massive. And I couldn't think of my own name, so I called my channel Orgiva Massive. And it was also a Facebook page. And I also thought, to be honest, that I'd probably get a lot of passing trade. Anyone typing in Orgiva who was in the area was going to come across us in Facebook, number 1 and 2. So because they kicked me off, I thought, fuck you lot, I'll do my alternative, because I had noticed that this place was stuffed full of expat criminals and they were, I guess, getting on my tits. They had inserted themselves in a million different ways into my life, making death threats, home force invading me. I could go on forever. I was abducted. Although there is a devious attempt to make it look like I wasn't abducted, I was actually abducted last Halloween. We'll talk about that to folks who would care to come over to the other side.
Right. So what we'll do now
And
is we'll jump over to the next channel right now. What I'm going to do is, guys, I'm going to post Nick's channel link in the live chat. Also, if you want to get it in the description or the comment section of this video, you can. But if you want to jump over to Nick's channel now, here's it here in the live chat. Nick's channel. Let me just post this.
would you like to pick up with Facebook then, and or give a massive and why
That's
I got
exactly
into
yes.
criminology and
Yes.
exposing scumbags?
Yes. This is exactly where we're
So
going.
can I give a little lead up to it, if I may?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Thank you. The reason why I'm here doing this was accidental, but it's because of my Facebook page exposing criminals who have inserted themselves with the most infamous child abduction ever. And I am surrounded by gang members of that suspect, and I've exposed them, and they've taken great exception to that. And I've managed to link them, my abductor, a whole load of devious characters and systems of operation, all the way through to some of our top podcasters.
Wow.
So I need a police investigation into these people, because the English paying public deserve answers. There's been 15 years since a certain individual was abducted, and I believe that I know enough information that should be investigated, and it should be reopened, and the investigation should look at people who claim to be here and people who are actually here and care not at all about the law, and they're very dangerous people, and this is what I need to talk about
Well,
next
look,
on
and
my
just
channel.
let's just state this. I have put Nick's channel link in the live chat. You can also get it in the comment section and description of this video. Just click that link. It'll take you over to his channel. We are now going to go live on Nick's channel where he will talk about his theories on certain people. Now, what I will say, and I have to stress this, right, for anybody watching, these are not my opinions. None of these are my opinions. I am here on Nick's channel to give him a bit of, not a bit of a pushback, but a bit of a question asking, because at the end of the day, you can't just say
Talk to
certain things.
myself.
Yeah, you can't talk to yourself, basically. So, guys, I'm going to end this broadcast right
Roland,
now.
just
Yep,
before we go, could I just
yep,
say to our audience, please,
yep.
that the schedule is for 15 minutes time.
15
So it's
minutes time.
exactly half past your hour
Yes.
now. In
hmm
15 minutes, we'll be going live on Arctic Nick.
Right, guys. If you want to get that, the link is in the live chat right now, comment section and description, and that will take you straight to the next
Hey, thank
channel.
you for listening to me. And thank
Subscribe,
you, Roland, for asking.
ring the bell, and make sure you tune in 15 minutes time, guys. Peace. Actually,
Come on over to.
hold on. First off, actually, I promised. Let me see if there's anybody in the live chat. Thank you, Ronan. Thank you, Nick. Clocks went forward, bro.
Oh, 5 minutes questions.
No, I don't think there's any questions. Guys, if there's any questions, jump over to Nick's channel and we will be taking all your
That's the
questions.
place. There's no
Right?
limits. It's called warts and all. You should
Warts
be
and all.
prepared for it.
Yeah. Peace.
It's the truth, simply.
Yeah.